Brian Norman Jr. stops, drops and eviscerates Jin Sasaki in 5 quick rounds. Let's talk about it. So going into this fight, not really many people knew much about Jin Sasaki, myself included. He'd fought quite a few sort of nondescript opponents over in Japan, with a draw and a loss on his record as well coming earlier in his career. Regarding Brian Norman, a little bit more is obviously known about Brian Norman, but even as a champion, it's a difficult one really, because with someone like Brian Norman, because of how weak 147 is currently, he's essentially a prospect who has ended up as a champion. So he still hasn't really built himself up yet. We still really haven't seen him tested to any great extent. So going into this fight, again, it was a little bit of the unknown really. But once they stepped into the ring, it was very, very clear that Brian Norman Jr. was levels above Sasaki, and it really wasn't even close. Sasaki came in within the opening 30 seconds of the fight, incredibly squared up, just walked forward with no foot movement at all, dreadful feet on Sasaki I have to say, and immediately found himself on the canvas twice within the opening 30 seconds. I think many of us, myself included, thought it looked like it was going to be a one-round blowout, but credit to Sasaki, he managed to tough it out and he got into the second round. Second round, much of the same. Norman really settled into his boxing, was picking off Sasaki. Sasaki throwing wild haymakers, throwing himself off balance, which would prove to be a bit of an ominous sign, as he kept trying to walk forward, kept trying to throw shots, again with zero foot movement, zero regard for defense, and he was just eating shots. Moving into the third round, he continued to do much of the same, but this time he was getting pegged back further and further by Norman Jr. Norman Jr. was banjoing him all over the ring. If this was in the UK, it would have easily got stopped in that third round because Sasaki was getting hurt every 5 or 10 seconds, getting staggered. If this was probably anywhere other than Japan, it would have probably been stopped right there and then, because Sasaki, you looked like he was going to get knocked out badly. It was quite clear that there was levels between these two fighters, and ultimately we saw what happened. The fourth round, Norman Jr. relaxed as you like, settled into his boxing, settled into his groove, and just continued to pick off Sasaki. Sasaki had nothing for him, nothing that he could offer. Again, he was being gritty, he was trying to walk forward, but again, the lack of feet was his main problem. He was just walking in squared up. If he tried to put his guard close together, the shots came round the side. If he tried to widen his guard, the shots came down the pipe. There was nothing he could do. And then the fifth round came, and he gets caught with a beautiful leaping left hook from Norman Jr. that catches him flush on the jaw, and he's out before he hits the ground. Not only is he out, he ends up having to leave on a stretcher in what was a knockout of the year contender. A fantastic performance by Brian Norman Jr. given the hostile atmosphere. Well, I say hostile. There's more hostile places to go than Japan, but still, he was in enemy territory and he handled the occasion brilliantly. I think when you look at the landscape of 147 now, I think it looks quite good for Brian Norman Jr. if I'm honest, because with Boots Ennis moving up, you've obviously got people still there, like, well, Haney's come up now, you've got Garcia there, but I think Rolly Romero has now been elevated to a champion. Less said on that, the better. I think for the IBF, that is now vacant, and I think that's going to be Panny Donovan versus Lewis Crocker, who contest for that. And with all due respect, I would pick Brian Norman over either of those. So I think when you also look at the other champion for the WBC being Mario Barrios, in my opinion, as I've touched on before, is not a great fighter. He is, of course, scheduled to be fighting Manny Pacquiao next month, and I think irrespective of who wins that, you would fancy Brian Norman to be either of those. So I think as far as the champions are concerned, the path looks relatively clear for Brian Norman Jr. I think it's actually quite a good time for him to be a champion, and it's probably good he is a champion, because the issue he's got is that he hasn't got a massive profile. Not that many people know Brian Norman Jr. at the moment. So if he didn't have that belt as a bargaining chip, he would probably struggle to get people in the ring. Even now, would you see a Devin Haney stepping in with him currently, or a Ryan Garcia? I'm not sure, to be frank. But I have to say, I've not seen a massive amount of Brian Norman before today, other than on a few undercards, but I was very, very impressed. It was a brilliant boxer-puncher performance, admittedly against limited opposition, but you can only beat what's in front of you. And I think that was a very, very punch-perfect performance. But what say you? You let me know. Thank you very much. Take care. Cheers.